everybody. Can you hear me? Oops, that's not on.
Hello, hello.
Hello, hello. Is this working? Oh, there we go. Excellent. Nice to see everybody. How are you doing this afternoon? Excellent. Hey, how are you? Well, very grateful for you all being here for our 105th Town Hall. Can you believe that? 105. And I want to give a shout out to entire campaign team. Everybody on the campaign, could you raise your hand, please? And could we give them a big round of applause? We're a year out from the 2024 election. And our team is already setting the foundation, doing the work, trying to make sure we're knocking on doors, making calls, having events like this. Earlier today, we had our 249th house party since I started running in 2017. A couple of you were there. Pretty incredible. But this particular town hall, I will make some introductory general comments about things that are happening in Washington, D.C. By the way, it's really nice to be with all of you, normal, reasonable people in Solana Beach, as opposed to being in Washington, D.C., where things have not been very normal or reasonable as of late. But we're focusing today on an issue that is extraordinarily important, gun violence prevention. And that's particularly true after the tragic events in Lewiston, Maine recently. I have a chance, have an opportunity to serve with Jared Golden. Jared is a very good friend of mine. He's the representative for Lewiston. And he's a Marine veteran, and he's a very conservative Democrat, one of the most conservative Democrats. And he was one of only a few Democrats who historically have not supported a ban on assault weapons. And after the shooting in Lewiston, Jared very courageously got up in front of his audience there of community leaders, and he said that he now supports an assault weapons ban. And for me, well, it is awful that it takes tragedies like that to get people to understand the imperative of getting the weapons of war off our streets and out of our communities. Nonetheless, I'm encouraged by that. But you're going to be hearing from some great community leaders today who are putting in the work. I want to begin, however, with a prayer, since we have a bishop here. Just a brief prayer from Bishop Bowser. Bishop?
Test.
Yeah.
There you go. Grace and testing. Yes, there we go. Grace and peace to you all. I'm going to say a prayer according to my faith tradition. Let us bow our heads as we acknowledge the Lord. Dear Father, we just thank you, Lord, for this privilege, opportunity we do have to come together in this town hall. We invite your presence in, your love, your comfort, and your grace, and your goodness. We ask, oh Father, as we come together today, we just say a prayer, Lord, for all the survivors and all those who have been impacted by gun violence, Lord, whether it's domestic violence or mass shooting, community violence, suicide. We have all been impacted, affected, and traumatized by, oh God, the senseless violence that is happening. We ask, oh God, as we come here today and gather today, that we know, Father, that by trauma it fractures us, but coming and sharing and telling our stories, it heals us and brings us back together. So let your power be in our midst, and we just say a prayer for peace and love and strength and understanding as we move forward, Lord, to bring changes in our cities, in our counties, in our state, and this nation, Lord. We want to have a safer place for everyone. So we thank you, and we say these prayers in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. You're pretty good at that. Got some practice. We also have Valerie. Where is Valerie? And Valerie Laguna is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. And the flag's right there. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. gallery. I wanted to acknowledge two elected officials that are here. From the Solana Beach City Council, we've got Jill McDonald. Great to see you, Jill. Thank you for all you do. And from the Del Mar City Council, Dwight Worden is here. Thank you, Dwight. Great to see you both. What I'll do is, I'll just speak for a few minutes about the state of gun violence prevention in Washington, D.C., and there will be plenty of time after the panelists speak for you to ask questions about whatever you'd like. Obviously, it's a very difficult time right now. Everything happening internationally, the situation in the Middle East, the situation in Ukraine on the top of my mind and everyone's mind. But also what's going on with domestic spending and making sure that the government doesn't shut down. I will just say that it is a very tough time, but I remain optimistic. I remain hopeful that we can still come together and do big things, because that's what we've been doing for the last 4.5 years. You know, it was said when I first got to Washington, D.C. in 2019, that Congress would never be able to pass anything with regard to gun violence prevention. It was said we'd never be able to pass anything with regard to the climate crisis. We had gone literally decades without a major infrastructure law. And I was told you could never get past Big Pharma to allow Medicare to negotiate prescription drugs. I was told that you could never get anything done with regard to semiconductors or microchips or domestic manufacturing. And we got all that done. And we got it done with a very, very small margin. And I'm proud of that. And particularly on gun violence prevention, we were able to pass something called the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, which was the most significant gun violence prevention legislation in about 30 years, since the original assault weapons ban, which ran from 1994 to 2004. And my hat's off to people like Chris Murphy. My friend Chris, Senator Murphy, did an amazing job. And credit goes to Senator Cornyn as well, Republican senator from Texas. They worked together and they said, look, we have to get 60 votes in the Senate because of the filibuster. And they were able to pass that legislation that will hopefully help lots of states that are trying to implement red flag laws, and it does other things as well, and it doesn't go nearly far enough. I can tell you that this issue is very personal to anybody who has children, particularly young kids. I've got an 11 and 9-year-old, my wife and I grew up in Southern California. Who here grew up in Southern California? Most of you. Wow, definitely most of you. Do you remember how we used to have earthquake drills all the time? Stop, drop, and roll. Anybody remember that? I certainly had those. Now they have active shooter drills. My son's in 6th grade, my daughter's in 4th grade, and they have active shooter drills. My understanding is here at Skyline they just had an active shooter drill not too long ago. And it's just a tragedy. It's a tragedy that when you've got, for example, 80+% of Americans want to see universal background checks, that Congress seems unable to act. So a couple things that need to happen. There are a couple alternatives. One is that we take back the House of Representatives in the election next year, and we make Hakeem Jeffries the Speaker of the House of Representatives. That's one option, because we'll force floor votes on the assault weapons ban, and on background checks, and on Ethan's law to make sure that we're doing all we can with regard to safe storage, and other legislation too. But the alternative to that, since we're in the minority, even by a small number, is something called a discharge petition. And it is exactly what it sounds like. And my dear friend Roseanne Sharp has been working very hard. By the way, give Roseanne a round of applause. Everybody know Roseanne? Nobody has done more to make sure that gun shows are not going on down the street at the Del Mar Fairgrounds. And I know it's frustrating right now. I know with the Orange County Fairgrounds, I know all that's being tied up in the court system right now, but no one has done more on that issue. But she brought up, how about discharge petitions? When you're in the minority, you can still get a bill heard and voted on the floor if you get a majority of members to sign a petition. They sign that, it's literally a physical petition, and then that discharges the bill to the floor. And there are currently 4 discharge petitions pending. One is the assault weapons ban, one is the background checks, actually 2 are background check related, one is Ethan's law on safe storage. And unfortunately, we can't get a single Republican to sign any of those discharge petitions, including people that are historically, with us on things, like Brian Fitzpatrick comes to mind. My friend Brian won't do it. And the reason Brian won't do it, and he's a moderate Republican from Pennsylvania, is because he sees it as a slight to his leadership on the Republican side. So we're in a bind, and we actually have a couple of members of the Democratic Party who won't sign on an assault weapons ban as well. So we've got our work cut out for us. The other thing you need to keep in mind is what I brought up before about the 60-vote threshold in the Senate. In order to overcome a filibuster, you need to get 60 votes. And that's where any bill that we develop will need to get 60 votes in the Senate. So just something to keep in mind. I have been working on legislation that would do that, on safe storage in particular, something called the Prevent Family Fire Act, where I've got Republican co-sponsors as well. We're working very hard to incentivize safe storage devices. Ethan's law goes further, and we have to obviously work with the other side and see what we can do as long as we're in the minority. But how many of you saw Mike Johnson's first interview where he talked about gun violence? Did anybody see that? So Mike Johnson got elected, and look, Mike Johnson's a nice guy. You just meet him, he's a nice enough guy. His tactics are not the same as some of the more extreme members, like Marjorie Taylor Greene comes to mind, some of these people. But his ideology is the same as the extreme in his party. So tactically, nice guy, but ideologically, way out there. And what he said about guns in particular, because the Lewiston shootings had just occurred, he said, well, it's not a problem of guns, it's a problem of the heart. Problem of the heart. And he said, if you blame guns, you'd have to blame cars as well, because, cars they can be used as a weapon too. You could run somebody over. And so what I was saying to our panelists is, okay, well, how about we require a license for guns the way we require for cars? How about we require insurance for guns the way we require for cars? Doesn't that make sense? I certainly think it does. So I'm hopeful, but I'm going to need your help. You're my ambassadors in this community. And groups like that I see out here, Moms Demand Action, San Diego Gun Violence Prevention Groups, and Never Again, everybody that's here, every town, all the national groups, Giffords Campaign, Brady Campaign, we need all hands on deck next November. And before that as well. So you're going to hear from some great local leaders here. We are going to start with Bishop Cornelius Bowser. He not only does prayers, he also does a lot of other stuff too. He's the founder and president of Shawfat Outreach. Their mission is to intervene in the life of our youth and adults who are actively gang involved or violence involved in order to help them make self-change through cognitive behavioral therapy and education classes. You'll be hearing from Bishop Bowser. We'll then move on to Nikki Faddick from Every Town for Gun Safety. You're going to hear from Mandy Fisher from Moms Demand Action. You're going to hear from Ron Marcus for San Diegans for Gun Violence Prevention. I will ask each of them to speak for no more than 3 to 5 minutes. And when we're done with that, we'll go to our Q&A. So Bishop, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon.
Here, take that one if you want. There you go.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's good to be here. Just give you a little background about myself first. I'm a former gang member. Was involved in the gangs in from the mid-'70s to the mid-'80s. And what turned my life around was God. I got in church, and I moved from violence to peace. One of the things I can tell you, in my era, I've seen both. I've seen the transition of fighting and going into guns, shooting. And when they say it's not the guns, it's most definitely the guns, because when we were gangbanging, when we fought, everyone went home. We see each other again the next day. But then when the shootings started happening, people started dying. And so I know that there's a difference between having a gun and not having a gun. I've been doing this work for over 30 years. My first program I started was Let Us Make Man Outreach Services back in 1992 to 1995, and that's when I started pastoring in 95. I think my primary focus back then was just gang intervention and prevention. About 8 years ago, when I started working with Moms Demand Action and the Brady Campaign, which eventually became San Diego's for Gun Violence Prevention, that's when my focus more so turned towards dealing with specifically guns. Because when I started looking at the data, especially with gangs, from the reports from SANDAG, I found that 100% of those homicides, each individual was killed with a gun. So we know that that's part of the problem when it comes to gang homicides. And our goal is to reduce gun violence in our community. I work in the Southeast, Mid-City, City Heights area, but we cover that whole region: National City, La Mesa, Lemon Grove, Spring Valley, El Cajon, Chula Vista, and so on. Wherever there's violence in those boundaries, those areas, we work. But our primary focus has been where the heart of most of the gangs are, which is in Southeast San Diego. And we focus on black and brown, and there's a more definite focus on black gang violence, because when you look at that, 20% of homicides in the San Diego region are black homicides. Out of that 20%, 56% of those homicides were gang-related homicides. Then, of course, when you look at gang-related homicides, 100% of those gang-related homicides, a gun was used. And so that's why we focus on gang violence as it relates to guns, because we know if we can tackle that, then we can reduce the violence in our communities. When you look at the state of California, 92% or more of gun violence, gun homicides are black and brown. And so we most definitely have to put a focus on it. Even on a national level, 50% of homicides are black people, right? And we know a large percentage of those were committed with a gun. So that's what we do. Our program is focused on, as Congressman mentioned, we focus on cognitive behavioral therapy, and we like to use the term theory because we're not clinicians, right? But cognitive behavioral therapy, trans-theoretical model of change, and also motivational interviewing. Because we believe that if we can get these individuals that are involved in the gang, we don't target just anyone at-risk youth per se, but we target that small percentage that we know that is out there committing the violent acts, and as far as involved in the gangs and so on. And so because I'm a former gang member, I know all the different individuals from the different gang sets, and so we reach out to them, we work with them to interrupt the violence. There's a difference between interrupting and intervention. Interrupting is going right in the midst of the fire when the violence is happening, to interrupt it, to disrupt that violence. And so our group is basically, when you look in Southeast San Diego, in that regional area, we're the only ones that do the interrupting. There's a lot of groups that does gun violence prevention and gun violence intervention, but interruption, we're the only group that's doing the interruption in the city of San Diego, no matter what anybody else tell you. We're the ones that's out there. We're the ones that know these guys that are engaged and involved in the violence and so on. We just started recently a gun diversion program through the city of San Diego. And when I say the city of San Diego, these are misdemeanors of individuals that go to court. There was a law that passed where they can divert those cases now. So the judges are referring these individuals to us. We started at the beginning of January with gun diversion. We have about 16 individuals so far that have been referred to our program. They have to be in the program 12 to 18 months and complete it successfully. And if they do, when they go back to court, their charges are dropped. In the process of time, we're working on them to change their behaviors, to hold them responsible for these ghost guns they're getting arrested with and these other illegal guns that they're getting stopped and getting arrested with. We teach them to be responsible and to think responsibly and so on. So that's some of the work that we do, and I look forward to the questions.
Thank you, Bishop.
Thank you for that outstanding work. I'll next turn it over to my dear friend Nikki Faddock. Nikki with Everytown for Gun Safety, a movement of nearly 10 million mayors, teachers, survivors, gun owners, students, and everyday Americans, the largest gun violence prevention organization in America, and they're winning. They're winning. So Nikki, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to be here with all of these fine human beings. I really appreciate it, and being able to talk about this important subject. As the representative said, my name is Nikki Faddick. I'm a grassroots organizer with Everytown for Gun Safety, which, stealing some of my points here, we are the largest gun violence prevention organization in the country. We do have 10 million supporters across the country, compared to the dwindling supportership of the NRA. And we have volunteer chapters in all 50 states, plus Washington, D.C. We are grassroots, we're nonpartisan, and we're working to address gun violence in all its forms. How I got involved, I'm one of 59% of Americans who has been personally impacted or cares for someone who has been personally impacted by gun violence. I have a cousin who was shot and killed, as the bishop was referring to, after a bar fight, and another cousin who was shot and left for dead by her estranged husband. He later turned the gun on himself in front of their 2 children. My cousin survived, but she has lived with a bullet in her neck for decades. And I have a second cousin who, in 2012, was 15 years old when he was shot and killed by a South San Francisco police officer. So it's close to home, but I'm also a person, like many of you, who was horrified by repeated mass shootings. I finally got involved in our movement in 2017 after the Las Vegas October 1st shooting there. Just getting to that point where you recognize we don't have to live like this, and we can get involved and come together to try to affect change. And that's when I joined our movement. And I stay, there are 120 Americans are shot and killed every day. Most of them, like my family members, you don't hear about. They don't make the news. They happen disproportionately in Black and brown neighborhoods, as Bishop Bowser was referring to. And that's, for so many people, there isn't a chance to have an enough moment because gun violence is at their doorsteps. And that's why we have to keep the drumbeat going and addressing the shootings that aren't on the news and the ones that are, because it's an unacceptable level of violence, and we need to build coalitions to address it. And that's why I'm proud of the work that we do at Everytown for Gun Safety. We have a community safety initiatives program that helps to fund and pull down funding and support organizations like Bishop Bowser's that do community violence intervention work, hospital-based intervention, safe passage for kids to be able to walk home from school. We connect with legislative partners at every level of government, local, state, federal. When we, have, obviously the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act was a huge success, but in the 25 intervening years when there was no progress on gun safety in Congress, we turned to state houses and even in local governments. The city of San Diego, cities around San Diego have passed secure storage ordinances. Counties have passed bans on ghost guns, working even at school board levels, and helping also candidates who are willing to stick their neck out and run on this issue at every level of up and down the ballot. We also work on litigation, both defending gun safety laws and filing and supporting cases against bad actors. You're going to see next week on Tuesday oral arguments in the Supreme Court in what's called the Rahimi case, where what is at issue is whether or not people under domestic violence restraining orders should be constitutionally allowed to own and possess guns. And this, of course, came about in the wake of the Bruin decision in the Supreme Court that has opened the books on decades-long gun safety provisions that we have had. So that's an important thing to keep an eye on. We focus on holding the gun industry accountable. This is an industry that has been making money hand over fist as their products have become the leading killer of our teenagers and young adults and children. So, by design, they have had very little accountability. So we're working to, help change that. The fact is that when mass shootings are carried out with assault weapons, over 2 times as many people die. The industry has helped make deadlier weapons, and in the past 10 years, they've made over $1 billion selling military-style assault weapons. That's unacceptable. We work on research, on documenting the scope of this problem, who it affects and how, and what the solutions are. And the facts are clear that states that have implemented strong gun safety laws have the lowest rates of gun death. There's just no way around it. So being able to document that, the solutions that we support are evidence-backed, and we know they save lives. It's just a matter of people having the political will to pass them and enact them. Obviously, this is a multifaceted problem, and it requires all of us coming together. I'm so proud of the work that I'm involved with, and so many people I see here today, and partners up here on the stage, and I just want to thank you for being here this afternoon.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Mandy Fisher from Moms Demand Action. Moms Demand is a grassroots movement of Americans fighting for public safety measures that can protect people from gun violence. They're an amazing group, and I think anybody that's followed these last few years, you've heard plenty from Moms Demand Action, and we would have not seen the progress in Washington, D.C. or at the state or local level without them. So Mandy, take it away.
Great, thank you. So I am Mandy. I am the local group lead for North County. And I thought I'd first tell you a little bit about what got me involved in this work. Every headline that I would read about another shooting, I feel it like deep in me. And I'm a very empathetic person, and so I would take it on, and I felt so frustrated and hopeless and helpless. And then so finally, after Uvalde, I decided enough was enough, and it was time for me to take those feelings and actually take action. So that's when I stepped up to be the lead. Nikki promised and Stephanie that they would help me, because I've never done this type of work before. I was brand new at it, and I was overwhelmed, but it's been the most rewarding, tiring work that I could do. But I've had a chance to speak with a lot of people in our communities, and they feel the same way. They feel frustrated. They feel helpless. And what's also surprising to me is they hear about our groups, and they're like, oh, you guys are already doing the work, and I don't have time to do it, or, I don't know what to do. And I just want to encourage people that 15 minutes a week can make a difference. One action that you can do can make a difference. And Moms Demand Action is actually the greatest example of that. Shannon Watt, one person, decided to take action and form this group, which then now is 10 million supporters. So if you could take away one thing today, it would be, please take one action. It could be very small. And as he said, we're the grassroots arm of Everytown. And what I love about that is that Everytown does all of this research that we get to take and build programs with it in our local communities. And so most recently, we've been focused on school safety. And so we have developed, based on feedback from our community, where parents they're scared when they're dropping off their kids, they don't know what's going on. There's a school active shooter drill. And so we decided to form these local school groups where there's a lead, and we feed them with materials that is based on Everytown research, and it's a step-by-step guide on what they can do. And the idea is that it's a collective action at a school, and that it is based on research. And the idea is hopefully that as they go through this checklist, hopefully the school is already doing these things. They already have a single point of entry. They already have the interior door locks. They're already sitting home, secure gun storage. So that then they have a peace of mind. They can have more control back. They know what to ask for their kids. They know what to expect. After this, we will have a sign-up sheet if you're interested, and you can be a parent or could be a community citizen. I am not a parent, and so I am involved in our schools here. And the other thing that I want to tell you is that we will be focusing on Vista next. Vista in North County is the most impacted by gun violence, and so we're going to target our efforts there. And we also know that we can't come in and tell a community how to change, but we can come and facilitate. So our idea is to bring the local groups and the local leaders together and bring a forum so that we can talk about the issue, and then they together with us can come up with a proposed solution that is community led. So afterwards, find me or Steve, somebody in the red shirt, and you can sign up. We'd love to have you join the fight.
Thank you so much. I just want to introduce Ron Marcus, who's the president of San Diegans for Gun Violence Prevention, another phenomenal group, and I really appreciate all they do. Remember meeting Carol, what, about 7, 8 years ago now, and just so impressed by all their hard work. Ron, take it away.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So I want to recognize there's a lot of different colored t-shirts in the room. There's a blue t-shirt over here, Team Enough. We have Never Again California. We have San Diegans for Gun Violence Prevention in red, also Moms Demand Action in red. So, and we have every town in black. There's a reason you see all these different colored t-shirts. A lot of groups are doing amazing good work. You've heard a lot of that right now. And Mr. Bowser is wearing a shirt color I'm not even sure I can describe, but he's very much in the trenches on all this as well. So what we found, what you've heard also is a little bit of descriptions of what I like to call the tipping point moment. There is a time before you become aware of this issue and it becomes a hard issue for you, and there's a time after. And all of us have had that tipping point moment. For me, if I may describe quickly, it was in 2012, in December of 2012. And I came out of work and it was about 5:30 in the evening, and I was blissfully unaware of anything going on, but I got in the car and the radio was already on, NPR, so I'm listening to All Things Considered, and they're talking about a mass shooting at an elementary school in Connecticut. And what I heard was so shocking and absurd that it was like someone had punched me in the gut multiple times, and it was equal to the feeling I had when 9/11 occurred. To think about 20 school children and 6 adults in the faculty that had been gunned down by an assault weapon. And so for me, that was the beginning, the very beginning. I also want to mention that today is my anniversary, my 8-year anniversary, and I had just met my future wife at that point, and I cried to her about how I was feeling about this situation. And I'd never felt that way before. So I and Carol, who's in the red shirt in the audience there, went to a mini town hall at a coffee shop, and we joined the Brady campaign. And we did that for a number of years, and then we got to know folks in town that were part of Moms Demand Action. They were doing the same work that we were doing. And then we met Ira and Roseanne Sharp, and they were doing the work for Never Again California. And then Brady had launched Team Enough, which was the youth movement for this. And we thought, instead of all of us doing all this work in parallel, why don't we come together and work together as a group? And so multiple stakeholders from the different groups came together, and we formed a 501c4. And I'll tell you why we formed a 501c4 in a moment. And that became San Diegans for Gun Violence Prevention, which was born in February of 2018. So we work very closely with all the different groups, and fast forward to 2022, May of 2022, and I'm a little bit of a late bloomer, but I had my first son, and he's 18 months in a week.
All right.
But a week after he was born, the Uvalde shooting happened. And I had been looking forward to taking some time off from the gun violence prevention work so I could focus on my child, who was a couple of weeks old at this point. And my wife graciously let me go to this rally that we did that day, that we had to do downtown. There was a massive turnout for that. Fast forward to now, and we've just had Lewiston. And as Nikki pointed out a few moments ago, it's the mass shootings that usually cause us to have our tipping point moments. But in the 2 hours that we will all be sitting here today, 8 Americans are going to be shot and killed in this country. It's ongoing. It's as the clock spins, people are getting shot and killed. 2/3 of gun deaths in this country are by suicide. And it may interest you to know that if someone has access to a gun and they're having suicidal thoughts, it's not a long, drawn-out, premeditated process. They get to a point where something happens, they snap, and they have suicidal tendency in that moment. And if there's ready access to a gun versus any other kind of weapon, I don't know if you know, but if you have access to a gun, you are more likely to succeed in killing yourself than access to any other weapon combined. Make no mistake, guns are designed to kill. That's really what they're designed to do. That's the only thing they're designed to do. They can be used for sport, for target practice, but they're designed to kill. So why a 501c4? Why not a 501c3? Because we want to be able to work with candidates, and we want to be able to advocate for causes that we wouldn't be able to speak out about in the same way if we were a C3. And one thing I do want to tell you about is that we have these cards. I think either we have some on a table or Carol can hand them out later. But we have a very careful vetting process for candidates who want to submit to us, local candidates, about what they are doing about gun violence prevention. And if they pass certain criteria, and we try to be very, very fair about this and nonpartisan, but we want to know that they are actually invested, as Congressman Levin is at the federal level, in helping stop gun violence prevention. And so if they pass the evaluation, then we will label them as a gun violence prevention candidate. And this is a way that you as a voter can have a sense of which candidates are strong on this issue and which ones aren't. So if you're a local candidate, I see a couple here, and you're interested in being part of this process, we'd love to have you apply. It's not hard, and you can get more information on our website. Our website is SD4 GVP, gunviolenceprevention.org. Another thing, I was just talking with Mandy before we got started here, and she was talking about safe storage and in schools. And SD4 GVP has worked with several folks to create a resource guide for schools about safe storage and how to talk about safe storage, how to educate educators and parents and everyone involved with school safety. So there are hardcover copies of this, but we also have this right on our website. And anyone who's involved in school districts who would like to get access to this toolkit is very well prepared, very well researched, very handy, and it's just everything you need in a box. You know, it's gun safety in a box. So last comment I make, I hope I'm not using up more time than I'm allowed, but I would just say that personally, I like the analogy with cars. Cars are considered, driving a car is considered a privilege. It's not a constitutionally protected right. No one bats an eye if someone's car gets taken away because they didn't drive responsibly. There's a lot of talk about the Second Amendment and about this right. Some people will call it a God-given right. But the First Amendment is also a right to free speech, and yet it's not an unchecked right. And there are ways that you can violate that right. There are ways that can be taken away. We've heard a lot of news about gag orders in the last few days. There are circumstances where you're not allowed to say certain things at certain times because they can endanger other people. So rights don't come at the expense of the rights of others. And so this issue is not so much about protecting the right to carry a gun. It's everything about the right for the gun industry to make money and for politicians to get money from the gun industry. And so at the end of the day, with all the things that we're doing, and gosh, aren't we lucky to live in California where we have so many great laws being passed and we're really a blue state. So that's awesome. But we need to, as Congressman Levin said, we need to take back the House. We need to keep the Senate and be stronger there. That's job one. And so all of our efforts collectively, let's keep doing the education, the legal advocacy, the intervention efforts that we work very closely with Bishop Bowser on that. But in the coming year, we really got to focus on this election. It's so darn important. So there's a ton more I could say. I've used up more than my allotment of time. Thank you, and thank you for being here.
Ron, did I hear right that today is your wedding anniversary?
Yeah.
And your wife knows that you're here? She's not here, is she? No. Okay, well, make sure you wish Ron a happy anniversary. And also, I realized that everybody got orange bracelets, but we were not intending to play favorites here, just so you know. We love all of our groups equally, regardless of the t-shirt color. So with that, I'd like to take as many questions as we can. We've got Barb and Misty who can help with that. If your question is about gun violence prevention, feel free to direct it to anybody up here, because we've got some real community leaders and experts with regard to gun violence prevention. But Misty, take it away.
Yeah.
you. And I just want to say, the way that this is going to work is everybody got a raffle ticket. I will be calling the last 3 numbers of the raffle ticket. And if your number is called for you to come up and ask a question, please come around to the back and come up to this area so that I can hold the microphone for you and you can ask your question. And I said that in a very specific way because I will be holding the mic. You can touch it, but you do not get to hold it yourself. Jack, I found him in the audience. He looks like a great candidate to help us with the raffle tickets. So he is unknown to me and will be an unbiased person to draw the raffle tickets. And again, I'll be calling the last 3 numbers. And please come around to the back of the room and come up and make a line on this. I will try. We're going to try to keep 3 people in line. So we'll be drawing a ticket number after each person asks their question. And thank you, Barb. You get 1 minute to ask your question. Barb will be timing you, and she's very tough that way. And everybody on the panel gets 3 minutes to answer your question, and she will keep them honest as well. The congressman sometimes gets a little leniency in that department. Okay. That's okay. 244 227 231.
Got 2.
It's like the price is right.
Yeah.
Come on down.
He picked himself?
He picked himself, is that what happened? Pretty good.
Okay, we'll make up for him with 234.
And please give me your name and the city where you live as well before you give us the question.
That's him. I said 244 earlier. Oh. Okay, here we go.
Hi, my name is Cindy, and I live in Solana Beach. I was just reading an article about Lewiston mass shooting in the paper, and clearly he had contact with mental health situation and should not have had his guns. And my concern is that even though this is, they're supposed to be able to remove their guns, at least here in California, if it's a domestic violence situation, for example. But how can we get the police support? Because I feel like the police sort of enable, in some ways, some of these shooters who he should have had his guns removed. I mean, it should be mandated. And how can we change that?
Well, a lot of it happens at the state legislative level, obviously, and I was speaking with my friend Jared Golden the other morning about this. You know, his position, it made national news that Jared now supports the assault weapons ban. And it was incredibly courageous of Jared to step forward the way he did. But when I asked him about it, he pivoted and said, look, it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, for us to get an assault weapons ban across the finish line with this Congress. But what he can do right now is use his influence to try to get the state legislature and the governor in Maine to begin to change course. And Jared is a strong proponent of the Second Amendment, a Marine veteran, somebody who has not been on my same side with regard to some of these issues. But it hit him personally. And my hope is that in the state of Maine, that there were a lot of other people who for the first time recognized it can happen here, it can happen anywhere. And so my hope is that, not that we want to see tragedy after tragedy facilitating action, but that, just the statistics as have been relayed are so overwhelming. That it should be apparent to all that more action is needed. And again, a lot of that will happen at the state level and the local level. There was a study that was recently reported on from Princeton University. They looked at all the state level actions that had been taken in the 90s, the 2000s, all the way up through I think around 2016. And it demonstrated a significant decrease in gun violence in those states where gun violence prevention measures were passed by state legislatures. So part of it's at the federal level, but a big part of it's at the state level. And specifically with regard to Lewiston, I think the state of Maine hopefully will change course. Thank you so much for the question, Cindy.
Next ticket 230, and I did forget to mention, once you ask your question, if you can please go back to your seat so the congressman can address everybody, that would be great. Come on up.
She's tough.
Hi there. My name is Paris. I live here in Solana Beach. I know that this session is about gun violence prevention, but I am an Iranian American, and my family has been incredibly impacted over the last year about everything that's been happening in Iran, and also this current war between Israel and the people in Gaza has been really difficult to be witnessing. And what my question really is around how you and your colleagues in our government can find ways to address what's going on there in a way that continues to humanize the people that are suffering and also prevents further violence and radicalization. The Islamic Republic, who's been holding Iran hostage for 44 years, has been doing everything they can to sow more hate and violence in this region. And I am very concerned with the way that our government is approaching this conflict, that is only going to create more radicalization and more violence and actually help the Islamic Republic with their war against democracy and freedom. So I'm just looking for how you and your colleagues can work together across the aisle to try and address this issue in a way that continues to humanize all of the people that are being impacted, because there are too many children that are dying. And we truly need to find a way to bring peace and focus on human rights of everybody. Israeli children, Palestinian children, children do not need to be dying. The children in our own country don't need to be dying because of violence as well. So I know that this is not the topic of this session, but I just wanted to take the opportunity to ask the question.
Thank you so much. Absolutely. And it's Paris, right? Thank you so much for not just the question, but for what you said. And I couldn't agree with you more that we have to consider the basic humanity of everyone, regardless of national origin, of religion, and particularly when children are involved. The numbers of children who have died are horrific. And I had the opportunity earlier this year to go to the Kfar Aza kibbutz and to meet with the families there, some children and families who unfortunately would be part of the attack by Hamas on October the 7th. My heart goes out to them. It also goes out to children of any background, including those who, by no fault of their own, were in Gaza, and I believe the number I saw was 3,900 children have been killed in Gaza. What I can tell you, first of all, I see this as a war not between Israel and the Palestinian people, not between Israel and the people of Gaza. It is a war between Israel and Hamas. Hamas is a terrorist organization. Most recently, just a couple of days ago, one of the leaders of Hamas went on both international and United States television and said that Hamas was planning to attack again and again and again. He said we would have 1 million attacks if necessary, until there was no more state of Israel. And so I have three main things that I think need to happen. Number one is Hamas needs to be eliminated. They need to be taken out of power in Gaza. It's critically important. Number two is we have to make sure to get the hostages out. There are still roughly 200, over 200 hostages who are being held captive, again, through no fault of their own, a victim of being in the wrong place at the wrong time. There are those who are being held who have connections to this district. I have spoken to their loved ones. This is very serious as well. And so I was frankly disappointed. Secretary Blinken went to Israel yesterday and brought the idea of humanitarian pause And Bibi Netanyahu rejected that in concept, at least it seems until we hear anything different. And that's very disappointing because a humanitarian pause is different than a ceasefire. A ceasefire says that we're going to provide a permission structure, potentially, for Hamas to attack again and again and again. And that's different from saying we're going to have a pause so that there can be basic humanitarian assistance. And that's really number 3, humanitarian assistance. Making sure that we get the water, the food necessary. We know a thing or two in North County, San Diego about desalination, right? We've got the Carlsbad desal plant. Desal is what a lot of these folks rely on for drinking water. Desal, as we all know, requires electricity, requires fuel to power the desal plant. Hamas is sitting on 200,000 gallons of fuel. They will not use any of that fuel for humanitarian purposes. They are using it to power rockets to go into Israel. This is fundamentally wrong. So again, we need to eliminate Hamas. We need to free the hostages. We need to get humanitarian aid. This is the last thing I'll say, Barb. I know time is up. But in the context of what just happened this past week, it's important that you all understand. Never before in the 75-year history of the state of Israel has the United States government conditioned aid to Israel. Never. And we shouldn't start now. And what Mike Johnson decided to do, Speaker Mike Johnson decided to do, is to condition aid to Israel on taking the $14 billion that we wanted to send to Israel and using money from the IRS. And if you take money from the IRS, it doesn't just cost $14 billion. The Congressional Budget Office estimated that it would cost an additional $12 billion. Because if you don't have as many people who are going after tax cheats, you're not going to collect as many tax dollars. So it would have been better to have no pay for it all than to pay for it by taking money out of going after wealthy tax cheats. Moreover, the president came to the Congress with about a $106 billion request that included aid to Israel, humanitarian assistance, aid to Ukraine, and oh, by the way, we need to make sure that we are there for Ukraine. It's critically important. And my Republican friends want border security, so do we. Money for border security and money for Taiwan. All 4 of those things combined. And what Mike Johnson decided to do in his first act as Speaker, and make no mistake, I want Mike Johnson to be a reasonable Speaker. I want him to work with us. I want him to get things done. We have to fund the government. We have to help our friends and allies around the world. We have to lead as the United States of America in a bipartisan way. But the first thing that he decided to do was to throw out 75 years of precedent and condition this aid to Israel and separate it from the other pieces of President Biden's supplemental request. What's happening now, and I know I'm way over time, but it's important, is that Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell are working together. You heard me right. They are working together to get a good bipartisan bill out of the Senate. That will then be sent to the House. And then Mike Johnson's going to have to make a decision. Does he allow us to vote on that bill? And I certainly hope he does. We've seen enough chaos and dysfunction and extremism out of the Republican House conference for many years. And it's time they work with us and get something done. I'll end it there.
But afterwards, you can try to speak with him.
Hello there.
Hi.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
What's your name?
My name's Jack.
Jack, how you doing?
Good.
Jack picked his own number.
Sorry about
It's
that.
all good. Don't be sorry. You're a lucky guy. You might, want to go hit the casino or something. No, I don't. Yeah, you might. That's true. That's a good point.
I'm a junior in high school. So.
Okay, don't go hit the casino, Jack. Don't go hit the casino. Don't do it. Don't do it. Never mind.
I'm a junior in high school, as well as I'm the president of my school's political debate club. And so I know whenever there's a shooting, especially a school shooting, that is a immediate topic of debate and conversation in our meetings. And so, as well as having analyzed and just read about these school shootings, I know that, especially Uvalde, police response was delayed and limited. So what actions can be taken to bridge that gap between the beginning of a shooting and police response for teachers, staff, school administrators, and even students to help limit the loss of human life and even prevent it between the initial start of the shooting and the police response to prevent loss of life?
It's a fantastic question. Does anybody from our panel want to talk about their experiences in San Diego?
I can just say from the Carlsbad district in particular, I think Stephanie and I were at hearing the police talk about how they went, it used to be like they would wait until so many police were there before they would go in to the school. I can't remember the number, I don't want to get that wrong, but they have changed it now because they know there's minutes before all the massacre could be done. And so now it's whoever's nearby. When the call comes in, and you don't just go in and see the wounded or whoever, you go straight and you take out that shooter. And so I think it's city by city that have the different rules, but that's the simple thing that the Carlsbad district has done.
This is going to be a really weird answer to your question, because I have no experience in this kind of matter, but I will say, and part of the reason a lot of us are here, you've probably heard of gun violence restraining orders. The gentleman that shot up Lewiston, police knew about him before in his condition, and he was allowed to continue and get those guns. Same with the Isla Vista school shooting back in 2014. And so what a lot of us are trying to do while preventing or stopping what's going on in the middle of a crisis is absolutely critical. At the same time, we're also trying to remove the circumstances that allow someone to get to the point that they can actually get to the campus, armed to the teeth, and do that in the first place.
Thank you. I just wanted to add, obviously the response in the moment is critical, but the moments that are missed in so many of the times, and this isn't going to apply to every situation, but secure storage. In many times, we know that 3/4 of all school shooters get the guns that they use from their own home or of a friend or relative. So, having responsible gun owners lock up guns separate from ammunition and locked away from kids helps prevent unintentional shootings, school shootings, gun suicide, and gun theft. So that's a really important intervention that is easy and essential. It's the law in California. So that's a piece that, and also that states can enact secure storage laws to help keep kids safe. And it's messaging that schools can send out repeatedly to remind their families who own guns that it's their responsibility to securely store their firearms.
Excellent. Go for it.
211-219.
Yeah, I'm Jill. It's all right. I'm Jill from Solana Beach. And my question is, do you think that we could change things on a national level if gun violence were declared a public health crisis or emergency? Is there anything that might fall into place? Think about how we changed the speed limits and cars have seat belts now because so many people are dying in car accidents. Same thing with tobacco. Is there any hope for that?
Well, gun violence is a public health emergency.
But if the Surgeon General... I'm sorry. Yeah.
I think the answer is it certainly couldn't hurt. I think the problem is that my colleagues, many of them on the other side, are just in denial about all this, and many go on record saying that the solution is more guns, or denying that guns are a problem at all. A lot of them will say it's mental health, and mental health is a huge problem in the United States, but it's also a huge problem in every other major industrialized nation, but we're the only ones with the gun violence problem. Mental health is a problem in all the European countries, but they don't have the gun violence problem that we have. Mental health is a problem in any South American countries. They don't have the gun violence issues the way we do. And we're talking about 40,000 plus people a year. And so I would love to see that. I also would love to see a House of Representatives that is willing to take up a single one of the gun violence prevention measures. A huge issue here, and you brought it up, is Citizens United campaign finance and the tremendous amount of dark money that is flooding the campaign system. And there are 435 members of Congress. There are only about 60, myself included, that don't take corporate PAC money. And what that means is that there are almost 400 that do. And so what happened after Citizens United 12 years ago is the corporate gun lobby, not just them, by the way, big oil, big pharma, a lot of other, and look, I'm not picking on any one particular member of Congress. I'm picking on the system. I'm picking on the system. And so we need fundamental change. And we need for you to advocate for that fundamental change so that that 60 members become 70, 80, 100, 150, 200. It's really, really daunting when you have hundreds of millions or even billions of dollars in this money flooding campaigns. Just last cycle, our campaign faced about $9 million in outside independent dark money spending. $9 million. And if you remember, there were TV ads which blamed me personally for basically every problem in America and the free world. To which my wife said, man, I didn't know you had all that influence as one member of Congress. I didn't know I had it either. But I'm just one member from Southern California. It's happening all over the country, and it won't stop until we actually put an end to the campaign finance system. So I need your activism and your advocacy because it's directly related to gun violence prevention.
232-204.
Hi, I'm Cindy, and I'm from here in Solana Beach, and you actually just answered my question about campaign finance reform. I think that is a crucial issue. So I'll ask another question of our local gun safety groups here. What would you like to see us do as citizens to help your cause? How can we get involved beyond obviously donating our money to your organizations, which I do?
Thank you, and that's a great question, especially for us. There could be other resources that are provided, especially with the work that we do in our communities. Like one of the things that we're trying to do now is show the correlation between the violence interruption that we're doing and how that helps reduce violence. So we're working with researchers and so on. So whatever resource that you have to provide those type of individuals doing research for us, Carol and back then it was Wendy Wheatcraft with Monster Man Action. They got out and walked the community with us. Right now we're doing an event for Thanksgiving and we're doing a turkey giveaway, but it's different from all the other turkey giveaways. We actually identified the guys that we know that are the shooters and try and getting them to focus their energy in a positive way. So they're gonna take the lead in giving out the turkeys and so on. And so one of the issues that we having is raising money for the turkeys. We're raising turkeys for money because resources, especially in our community, is so important to get the kind of support that we need and so on. So being connected with us, Carol, I keep mentioning her because she's like in all of our meetings and all of our planning of events that we do in our community. If you can get involved with that, like our Seasons of Peace, we meet on a weekly basis to plan in the future of how we can disrupt and prevent violence from happening in our communities. That would be a great place to start by getting involved, volunteering, and getting involved with us because we need a lot of help in a lot of areas. And of course, Carol is a great resource, but we need, she'll tell you, the more we have, the better it would be for us as folks get involved with that.
Great.
I was just going to mention a quick thing. I mean, that's the thing about our movement. There's room for, no matter what amount of time you have to give, there is something you can do. If you have 5 minutes, if you have an hour, if you have 10 hours. So I have a quick thing that folks can do right now. If you take out your phones, you can send a text message to 64433 and text the word checks, as in background checks. So it's 64433. Text the word checks. So in August, the Biden administration released a new rule through the ATF that would redefine exactly who is a gun seller to tighten the regulations. It's called engaged in the business. If you are at a gun show and you have rented a booth to be there to sell guns, you are engaged in the business of selling guns. If you are online and you've created a website to sell guns, you are engaged in the business. But for too long, there's been a gaping loophole that has precluded these folks from having to register as federally licensed firearms dealers. When they don't have to register as federally licensed firearms dealers, then the people who buy guns from them don't have to undergo a background check. So this rule is vitally important. This will take you to a form where you can simply fill it out, edit it, customize it if you want to, but send that in to help support changing this important rule and closing that loophole. Thanks.
Anybody? Okay. So any one of these groups would be great for you to get involved. I always say, like broken record, and a lot of people have heard me say this, that many hands make light work. And so if you have 5 minutes a month, that's five fewer minutes that someone else has to try to get that done. If you have any special skills at all, we have a legislative advocacy team, we have a communications team, PR, we have an educational outreach team, we have an intervention, we have youth, that's right. We have all kinds of ways that you can get involved, a little or a lot. We also have very simple things you can do. Go to events that are being put on, rallies, or write a letter to a congressperson or a senator, or make a phone call, let them know how you feel. And you can go out and canvass for a candidate of your choice to help them get the vote. I hope you'll canvass for, this is me talking on behalf of my organization, but I happen to favor the Democratic Party on this, in this regard. But, get out the vote. I know you're all going to vote, but there's a lot of people who may be on the fence. They're not sure who they're going to vote for. They're not educated on certain issues. And this is something, you can spend a couple of weekends here and there. It's actually kind of fun. It's not too much effort. Sorry, you asked the question. I was looking at the whole group, but it's an excellent question. And there's a lot of ways, a little or a lot, whatever you have time for. We welcome the help. Thank you.
222-208-249.
Hi.
Hi there.
So it's occurred to me, I'm not supposed to hold it, you are, right? It's occurred to me that there are many wonderful organizations here today, and I'm wondering, as a resident of an area that's fairly blue and a state that's fairly blue, what I can do nationally. For example, I'm pro-choice, and for years I've donated to Emily's List. They started out supporting pro-choice national candidates. They are now moving down the scope and looking for candidates at the state and local level. And so I rely on them to tell me where my campaign dollars should go. Is there something like that on the national level that supports candidates who would like to see some sort of limits on gun possession?
I would say one thing about this, council member, which is that even though Solana Beach is a pretty blue city, you happen to live in one of the most competitive congressional districts anywhere. This is a self-interested response. Anywhere in the United States. And I can guarantee you that any of the candidates running against us in this district are going to be awful on issues of gun violence prevention and reproductive rights, and lots of other things too. So while I would encourage you to get involved at the national level, remember that as goes this congressional district, so goes the House of Representatives. Whether Hakeem Jeffries or Mike Johnson is Speaker of the House in January of 2025 could well depend, this is not exaggerating, could well depend on the outcome of this election in this district and districts like it across the United States, of which there aren't really that many. So I would just throw that out there. But with that being said, does anybody want to talk about getting involved nationally? Nikki.
Thank you. Yeah, our organization, Everytown and Moms Demand Action, has a program called the Gun Sense Candidate Distinction Program. It started in 2018. We hoped a few hundred candidates would apply for and receive the distinction. Hundreds did. In the last election cycle, 5,000 candidates ran as Gun Sense candidates. That demonstrates how much the calculus has changed. Where people used to be afraid to touch and run on this issue, it is a different story now. So if you're running for office yourself, consider applying for our program. We also have a candidate training program called Demand a Seat. My friend Stephanie is a graduate of the program. We just started our new Demand a Seat program for youth, for Gen Z, for our students. You know, if you look at someone like Congressmember Maxwell Frost, like, you know, that this generation that's so deeply impacted by this issue should also think about running on it. And so, you know, and then getting out there, like others have said, knocking doors, making phone calls for the people who are willing to run on this issue is the most important thing we can do with our time up and down the ballot. Thanks.
252.
Yeah, come on up. Yeah, Colleen, come on up.
So I'm a little bit shaking, just want to share that. I had so many thoughts and so many questions, but as we go on, everything seems to shift. But I'm going to ask a few questions. The first one is, how do we let people know that, for example, as a Jew, I don't want Palestinians to die. I want everyone to live. All lives are of value. And I feel like the whole country is so confused about that. How do we get supposedly intelligent elected officials to make intelligent choices? Okay. And how do we get them to believe otherwise? I just want to say that after the shooting in Buffalo, my husband and I raised money. We went to Buffalo just to love the people there and let them know that California cared. And when I came back, I reached out to one of the TV stations here. I will not, well, I could say Channel 8. I won't tell you who I talked to, but that person said to me, well, you know, that's old news. But it's not old news for the people left behind. And I feel like that's so important for all of us to remember. So I don't know what my questions are exactly, except that I need change, because when I was at a meeting the other night, every time somebody came in late, I was turning around to make sure they didn't have a gun, and then planning that I would put the metal chair on top of myself if they started shooting. So I don't want to live like that anymore, and we need to do something.
I guess, you know, one thing that I would say, I think a lot about how we get people in elected office to represent the best of us. I think about growing up in Orange County, California during the 1980s, the Reagan Revolution, where my neighbors down the street, many of them wonderful, honorable, decent people. And it was a time in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, really until a few years back, where if your neighbor got a flat tire and was stopped on the side of the road, you wouldn't look at their bumper sticker to see if their political ideology matched yours. You would just help them as your neighbor. And I think back to all the Republicans that I've admired over the years. John McCain immediately comes to mind. Both Bushes, by the way, W. Bush looking better and better every day, I have to tell you. Mitt Romney, who was the GOP standard bearer against President Obama in 2012. And I disagreed with all these people on different issues, but I never questioned their dedication to democracy, to our institutions, the rule of law. And so I think about this all the time, and it seems to me that we've had a couple of things happen. In the last few years, there has been a permission structure to treat each other as enemies rather than as someone of a different political party. And I don't want to cast aspersions or point fingers, but the former president had an awful lot to do with creating that permission structure and continues to this day. When I think about the media today, both the cable news networks and social media, every day when I'm in Washington, D.C., the U.S. Capitol, and I leave the House chamber or I go out on the front steps, I see a bunch of members of the press who would love nothing more than to have me go and rip my colleagues to shreds. Because it would be good television, it would be engaging and entertaining. Well, I believe each one of us in public office has a choice to make every day. We can either use those offices and the public trust to try to bring people together with whatever influence we have, with whatever microphone we have, or we can use that office to further divide people. And I make the conscious decision, not always an easy decision, sometimes quite difficult as a matter of fact, to use the office to try to bring people together, to try to do all I can to try to find common ground, even when I know that there are a huge number of people on the other side who don't share that vision, and frankly, some on my side that don't share that vision. There are far too many people in Washington, D.C. who would rather see themselves on cable news or get the most retweets, or reposts, I guess it's not retweets anymore, as opposed to actually doing the job. Representative is not the title, it's the description. And so when I have events like this or house parties like we had this morning, now 105 and counting of these, 249 house parties and counting, or when we have open office hours and we listen to our constituents and we try to be responsive, that's what the job is supposed to be. And so I look at it through that frame. I think the people who are most divisive, the way that we get them to stop being so doggone divisive, number one, we turn the station off. We don't give them the oxygen they want. We get off of social media all the time. We try to have a more balanced media diet and actually turn on NPR and PBS and not just watch cable news, even if you are ideologically inclined to watch one network or the other. I'd say turn it off. It's not good for the soul at some point. We're all Americans. I believe Mike Johnson loves this country like I do. We very much disagree on lots of stuff. But if we're going to be able to come together as an institution, we've got to get past this dark time. And we need Republicans to want to get past this dark time as well. So I'll just leave it there.
We are now coming on the last question. But before that, I would like to just cover a couple of items because otherwise you're all going to probably run out the door and I won't get the chance to say it then. There was, when you got into your seat, there's a comment card. The comment card is for you to leave feedback as to how you felt this town hall went. And Bradley will be reading each and every one of those and taking the feedback to make sure that we can replicate the things that were very good and make changes where you all felt changes should be had. So please make sure you fill those out. There will be people at the back at the door that you can drop those cards off to. I'm missing something, but I don't know what I'm missing now. Is that it? I think that's it. Okay, and now for all of you, the very last question. Oh, if you did not, that's right, thanks Barb. If you did not get your question asked, we didn't get to your number, please send your question to it's info@mikelevin.org, and the question will get passed on. It may take some time to get the answer to you, but please send it and you will at some point get the answer that you're looking for, because sometimes it takes a bit of research depending on what it may be. So please send it to info@mikelevin.org, and here you are with the last question.
First of all, I'd like to just compliment you on Jonathan. Your assistant is very professional. I've had some communication through email with him, and
Thank you.
he's really on top of it.
Thank you.
Mike, you don't remember me. My name is Mark Levin.
Yes.
I
was
actually
at,
do.
I was at the town hall with you in Del Mar, and I asked you a question, and I felt that you disrespected me. And I'm going to ask the question again, okay? We're from the same tribe. We have the same last name, so this is important to me. It's my name. I asked you back then and told you that I grew up in a Democratic liberal family for generations. And my family has left the Democratic Party. Most of my friends have left the Democratic Party. We are moderate Republicans. We believe in pro-choice. We believe in a lot of the social things that normal Democrats and liberals believe in. What I'm asking you about, and one of the main reasons why I left the Democratic Party, is the anti-Semitism in the party. It's horrible to me and my family. And when I asked you this question of what you could do in Congress 4 or 5 years ago, your response was to impeach Donald Trump. And then when I said to you, you didn't answer my question, you did this to me and told me to sit down. I didn't like it. It wasn't nice. I tried to contact you and meet you in person through Jonathan. We were supposed to have a phone call. My daughter got injured. I wasn't able to make the phone call, and I told Jonathan not to worry about it. So luckily, I'm the last question here. And I do appreciate you being out in our neighborhoods. I know that you meet with people all over our neighborhoods and have these home parties. I know some people who have been with you at home parties. And I do appreciate you are obviously very involved in the community, and thank you for that. But what can you do, and why are you not out in front? Why are you not the person on CNN? Why are you not raising the roof and really saying something instead of maybe signing a letter that went through Congress, things like that? My personal need for you is for you to be out front more and not behind the scenes. So can you do that for us?
First of all, I want to apologize to you, Mark. I don't remember the interaction that we had 4 or 5 years ago. All of them are on video, though, and if we can work together, we can try to find it. And I promise you I'll try to do better, not just with you, but with everybody that has questions. I genuinely want to be respectful of everybody that has questions. I can tell you that I have no tolerance for anti-Semitism, and it's personal to me just like it's personal to you because we do share a last name. And I'll just give you one personal reason why. Now, my grandfather, Ted Levin, fought in World War II and obviously fought Nazi Germany and tyranny. And he came back from the war and he started a small carpet and drapery and upholstery business. And he moved from Chicago to Los Angeles just after World War II. And he called it Levin Interiors, he and my grandma. And they found that they could not call it Levin Interiors. They could not use our family name in Southern California in the late 1940s and early 1950s. And it's never sat well with me that my grandfather, who I look up to, he's passed away, but I look up to him more than anybody else in the world, Mark. And he couldn't use our family name in his business, and he had to change his name for business to Ted Dean. It's after the actor James Dean. He looked nothing like James Dean, but he changed the name in his business to Dean Interiors. When he passed, I gave the eulogy at his service, and hundreds of people knew him only as Ted Dean. Somebody who had just served their country could not use his own last name. So it gives me great pride that 50 years or so later, 60 years, when I decided to run for Congress, we plastered our name all over signs, shirts, buttons, television ads. We did so proudly. And every time I see that name, I think of him. You come to my office in Washington, you'll see a painting right behind my desk that my mother painted of my grandfather in his flight outfit in the B-24. I think of him when it comes to defending the state of Israel. I think of him when it comes to defending Ukraine from Russia, from tyranny and oppression. And I think of him when standing up to anti-Semitism. I don't care where the anti-Semitism is coming. I don't care if it's from the left or the right. I condemn it, unequivocally condemn it. I've done that privately, I've done that publicly. It's not just signing letters. It's making sure that I am vocal in every opportunity that I get. That includes most recently, just 2 days ago, when the House of Representatives overwhelmingly, in a bipartisan way, voted to condemn anti-Semitism happening at our college campuses here locally and around the nation, after which I immediately told Jonathan, and you can ask him, to reach out to UC San Diego and our local community colleges to see what they specifically were doing to address anti-Semitism, because it should never be the case that any Jewish American feels uncomfortable going to school or in the workplace, period, full stop. As far as me going on CNN all the time, I'm not your guy. Let me explain why though. I will go on CNN or MSNBC or Fox News anytime they want to ask me about something that is directly relevant to our district and the work we are doing for this community. But that's never why they want me on. They've also never asked me on to talk about anti-Semitism. They only have asked me on, 90% of the time, I've gone on a handful of times, but they only asked me on to tear the other side to shreds. And I won't do it. I won't do it. I won't take the bait, because it's hurting America. It's hurting democracy.
So after that vote, does you or anybody else actually talk to the squad and like give them some feedback or tell them, hey, what's up, or any kind of pressure back to those horrible people?
We do. And
How do you do it?
well, I think that some of it gets reported on, some of it doesn't, but I want you to know that I won't tolerate it, whether it comes from Marjorie Taylor Greene or Rashida Tlaib or anyone. We won't tolerate it. Period, end of story, full stop. And I appreciate the question. I want to thank you all again. I want to encourage you to tell your friends that you came today and get involved. There are several organizations here who need your help. Our campaign also could use volunteers. We have a campaign office just down the way. In Carlsbad, people are making phone calls and knocking on doors. We're a year out from what I will offer, I believe, to be the most critical election in the history of the United States, where it's all on the line. And so I hope that we wake up the morning after that election knowing that we left no stone unturned, knowing that we gave it everything that we had. And I hope to the extent that you get involved with these organizations, that you do the same, because we've all got to be that change that we want to see. So until next time, thank you all. Thanks to our team. We appreciate having you here. And we'll see you at our next town hall. Thanks, everyone.